Hello, dear friends. So glad you could join us at Potter Paradox. Today's narrative adventure is titled What If Harry's Accidental Magic at Age 4, Burned Down Privet Drive and the Goblins Arrived Before Dumbledore. We put our heart into every story we share. If you appreciate our work, showing some love with a like and subscribe would make our day. The story begins now. Chapter 1, The Flames of Change. The cupboard under the stairs was dark and stuffy as always. 4-year-old Harry Potter curled into a tight ball on his thin mattress, trying to ignore the rumbling in his tummy. He hadn't eaten since breakfast yesterday, just a piece of toast and a glass of water, because he'd accidentally dropped a plate while washing dishes. Uncle Vernon's face had turned that scary purple color, and Harry had been locked away without dinner. Harry's small fingers traced the spider web in the corner of his cupboard. "Hello, Mr. Spider," he whispered. "At least you get to go out and find food." A sharp rap on the door made him flinch. "Up. Get up now." Aunt Petunia's shrill voice pierced through the thin door. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. "I need you to help with breakfast before Vernon leaves for work." Harry scrambled out, blinking against the sudden light. His two large hand-me-down pajamas dragged on the floor as he hurried to the kitchen, his aunt's bony hand shoving him forward. "Don't burn the bacon," she warned, lips pinched tight. "And be quick about it." Harry stood on his tiptoes to reach the stove, carefully turning the bacon with a fork while trying to ignore how good it smelled. His stomach growled loudly. "Quiet, boy," Aunt Petunia snapped. "And start the eggs when you're done with that." The front door of the kitchen swung open, and Dudley waddled in, already whining. "Mummy, I want pancakes too." "Of course, Duddykins," Petunia cooed, completely changing her tone. "The freak is making breakfast now." Harry kept his eyes down, focusing on not burning anything. He'd learned that looking at his aunt or cousin when they called him names just made things worse. The bacon sizzled and popped, occasionally sending hot grease onto his small hands. He didn't cry out, that would just make Uncle Vernon angry. Speaking of his uncle, heavy footsteps announced the man's arrival in the kitchen. Vernon Dursley's massive frame filled the doorway as he entered, his mustache twitching as he sniffed the air. "Bacon ready yet, boy?" he barked. Almost, Uncle Vernon," Harry stammered, carefully flipping the last strips. Vernon grunted and sat heavily at the table, snapping open his newspaper. "Hurry it up. I've got an important meeting this morning." Harry worked as fast as his little hands could manage, plating the bacon and starting on the eggs. His arms ached from stretching to reach everything, but he didn't complain. Complaining always made things worse. He served Dudley first, the biggest portion, then Uncle Vernon, then Aunt Petunia, moving quickly between the stove and table. When everything was served, he stood quietly by the counter, waiting for further instructions. "What are you staring at?" Vernon growled, catching Harry's gaze accidentally landing on the food. "Get to your chores." "But..." Harry's voice was barely audible. "Can I have something to eat?" The kitchen went silent. Dudley smirked, shoving a forkful of eggs into his mouth as he watched. Aunt Petunia's lips disappeared into a thin line. Uncle Vernon's face began to redden. "After your behavior yesterday? Breaking our dishes and now demanding food like you deserve it?" "I'm just really hungry," Harry whispered, his small hands clutching his rumbling stomach. "Please." Vernon slammed his fist on the table, making the plates jump. "That's it. The absolute ingratitude. After all we do for you, clothe you, put a roof over your ungrateful head." Harry backed up until he hit the counter, his heart racing as Uncle Vernon pushed back his chair and stood up. The man's face was turning that dangerous shade of purple that meant real trouble. "I didn't mean," Harry started. "Don't talk back," Vernon roared, advancing on the small boy. Something inside Harry shifted, a strange warmth spreading through his chest and out to his fingertips. He was scared, so scared, but also angry. Why did they always treat him this way? Why did they hate him so much? The unfairness of it all crashed over him like a wave. "I just wanted some breakfast," Harry said, his voice steadier than before. Vernon's eyes bulged in outrage. "How dare you?" His meaty hand raised, and Harry flinched, preparing for the blow. But then something extraordinary happened. The strange warmth inside Harry suddenly flared hot, too hot, racing through his veins like liquid fire. His vision blurred with unshed tears, his small body trembling with fear and hunger and something else, something powerful and uncontrollable. "I said I'm hungry," Harry cried out. The lights in the kitchen flickered wildly. The frying pan on the stove erupted into a column of blue-green flames that shot toward the ceiling. Within seconds, the curtains caught fire, and instead of normal orange flames, they burned with the same eerie blue-green color. "What have you done?" Uncle Vernon bellowed, his face now chalk-white. He grabbed Harry's arm, fingers digging in painfully. "Stop this right now." But Harry couldn't stop it. The fire was spreading with unnatural speed, racing along the walls and ceiling. The heat was intense, but strangely, Harry didn't feel burned. The flames seemed to bend around him, almost protectively. "Vernon!" Aunt Petunia screamed, grabbing Dudley and pulling him toward the door. "The boy's doing it again. The freakishness." Uncle Vernon's grip tightened painfully. "I'll beat it out of you once and for all," he threatened, raising his free hand. Something in Harry snapped. The fire roared in response, a massive wave of blue flame erupting between Harry and his uncle. Vernon leapt back, cursing and slapping at his singed eyebrows. "Run!" Petunia shrieked, dragging Dudley through the kitchen door. Vernon backed away from Harry, his face contorted with fear and rage. "You little monster," he spat, before turning to follow his wife and son. Harry stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by magical fire that danced and swirled around him without burning his skin. He should have been terrified, but instead, he felt an odd sense of relief. For once, he wasn't powerless. The fire continued to spread, consuming the kitchen with unnatural speed. Harry knew he should run, but where would he go? Back to the cupboard? After the Dursleys who hated him? The neighbors who always believed he was a troublemaker? So he stood, frozen in place, as number 4, Privet Drive began to burn around him. Half a mile beneath London's financial district, a magical alarm blared through the pristine white marble halls of Gringotts Bank. In the detection and response department, a young goblin named Griphook nearly fell out of his chair as the monitoring crystal before him flashed from its usual cool blue to a vibrant, pulsing crimson. "Senior Sharp Fong," he called out, frantically checking the readings. Unprecedented magical surge detected in Surrey. Sharp Fong, a battle-scarred goblin with a silver streak in his otherwise black hair, moved with surprising speed for his age. In 3 quick strides, he was looking over Griphook's shoulder at the monitoring crystal. "Coordinates," he barked. "Little whinging, Surrey," Griphook replied, his long fingers dancing across the crystal's surface. "Number 4, Privet Drive. Wait." His eyes widened. "The magical signature matches one in our records." Sharp Fong peered at the data scrolling across the crystal. "Impossible. The power levels are off the scale for accidental magic." "But the signature is unmistakable," Griphook insisted. "It's Potter. Harry Potter." The senior goblin went still, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Pull up the Potter file." Griphook hurried to a nearby cabinet filled with golden folders, extracting one that glowed faintly. He handed it to Sharp Fong, who scanned it quickly, his expression growing darker with each page. James and Lily Potter, both deceased. Son Harry James Potter, sole heir to the Potter vaults. Current magical guardian. Sharpfang's voice took on a dangerous edge. Albus Dumbledore. Why would the Potter heir be in a Muggle neighborhood? Griphook asked. A very good question. Sharp Fong closed the file with a snap. And why is his magic erupting at this magnitude? This is no ordinary accidental magic episode. He straightened up, decision made. Assemble a response team immediately. Full combat gear. Griphook's eyes widened. Combat gear? For accidental magic from a wizard child? For whatever we might find, Sharp Fang corrected grimly. The Potter accounts are among our most valuable. If their heir is in danger, Gringotts' interests are at stake. He paused, then added, and send an urgent message to Director Ragnarok. He'll want to know about this development. As Griphook scurried off, Sharp Fang glanced back at the monitoring crystal. The pulsing had intensified, the red now shot through with veins of gold. Whatever was happening at Privet Drive was escalating. And if Dumbledore had somehow endangered a valuable client? Sharp Fang bared his teeth in what humans might mistake for a smile. Banking was the Goblins' primary business these days, but they hadn't forgotten their warrior traditions. Sometimes, the old ways were still necessary. Especially when it came to protecting Gringotts' investments. The fire was everywhere now. Harry stood in the middle of the kitchen, untouched by the flames that had consumed most of the first floor of number 4. He could hear sirens in the distance, neighbors must have called the fire department. Through the windows, he saw people gathering on the street, pointing and staring at the house as thick smoke billowed into the clear morning sky. He should feel scared. He should run. But the fire felt right. Like it was a part of him, an extension of the anger and hurt that had been building inside him for as long as he could remember. A section of the ceiling crashed down nearby, sending up a shower of sparks. That finally broke Harry from his trance-like state. Fire or no fire, he needed to get out before the whole house collapsed. He made his way toward what had been the front door, the flames parting before him like curtains. Just as he reached the entryway, the front door burst open, but it wasn't firefighters who entered. 5 short figures in gleaming armor strode into the burning house. They had swarthy, clever faces, pointed ears, and sharp teeth visible beneath their helmets. Each carried what looked like a short sword at their belt, and they moved with practiced precision, spreading out to secure the entryway. Harry froze, eyes wide behind his broken glasses. Were these creatures here to punish him for what he'd done? The tallest of the 5 stepped forward, removing his helmet to reveal a face lined with age and crisscrossed with old scars. His dark eyes fixed on Harry with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. "Harry Potter," the creature asked, his voice rough but not unkind. Harry nodded mutely, too shocked to speak. "I am Senior Sharp Fang of Gringotts," the creature said. "We detected your magical distress. Are you injured?" "Magical?" Harry blinked in confusion. "And no," he managed. "The fire doesn't hurt me." Sharpfang's eyebrows rose slightly. "Impressive," he murmured, before turning to his companions. "Secure the perimeter. Wizard authorities will be inbound." To a younger goblin, he added, "Griphook, run a diagnostic." The one called Griphook approached Harry cautiously, holding what looked like a golden compass. He circled it around Harry's head, then his chest, frowning at the readings. "Magical exhaustion imminent," Griphook reported. "But no physical injuries. However." He hesitated, "There are signs of prior injuries. Malnutrition. Possibly broken bones that healed improperly." Sharpfang's expression darkened. "The Muggles?" Harry looked down at his feet, suddenly ashamed though he didn't know why. "My aunt and uncle don't like me very much," he whispered. A low growl rumbled from Sharpfang's throat. "Where are they now?" "They ran away when the fire started." One of the other creatures, goblins, Harry supposed, approached Sharpfang. "Sir, wizard authorities detected. Estimated arrival in 5 minutes. Ministry first responders end." The goblin's lip curled slightly, Albus Dumbledore. Sharpfang made a swift decision. "We're taking the boy. Magical inheritance laws give us jurisdiction over the Potter heir's welfare in an emergency." The wizards won't see it that way, Griphook warned. Then they should have protected him better, Sharpfang snapped. He turned to Harry, his fierce expression softening slightly. Mr. Potter, will you come with us? We can take you somewhere safe, where you'll be properly cared for. Harry hesitated. These strange creatures had shown more concern for him in the last 2 minutes than the Dursleys had in 4 years. But still. Who are you? What are goblins? Sharpfang's mouth twitched into what might have been a smile. We are the keepers of wizard gold and magic's oldest secrets. Your parents entrusted their wealth to our care, and by extension, we have a duty to their heir. He extended a gnarled hand. I swear on Gringotts' honor, no harm will come to you in our care. A crash from upstairs emphasized the urgency of the situation. The fire was consuming the house at an unnatural rate, and even if it wasn't burning Harry, smoke inhalation would soon become a problem. Harry made his choice. He reached out and took Sharpfang's hand. Good lad, the goblin said approvingly. Now, this might feel strange, but hold tight. He pulled a golden coin from his pocket, holding it out so all the goblins and Harry could touch it. Gringotts emergency return, authorization Sharpfang Gold Heart, security code Vault 713. The coin glowed blue, and Harry felt a sharp tug behind his navel. The burning house disappeared in a whirl of color and sound. His last thought before the magic swept him away was that Aunt Petunia would be furious about what he'd done to her perfect house. Somehow, that didn't bother him at all. Albus Dumbledore arrived at Privet Drive amid chaos. Fire trucks lined the street, muggles were gathered in shocked clusters, and Number 4 was engulfed in unnatural blue-green flames that resisted the firefighters' best efforts. His heart sank as he took in the scene. Magical fire, undoubtedly. The monitoring spells he'd placed on Harry had alerted him to a massive surge of accidental magic, but he'd never imagined something of this magnitude. Albus. Minerva McGonagall operated beside him, her face pale with worry. The boy, I don't know yet, Minerva, Dumbledore said grimly, drawing his wand discreetly beneath his robes. A quick notice-me-not charm ensured the muggles wouldn't pay attention to the oddly dressed elderly man and woman. Stay here and be prepared to help with memory modifications. I need to find Harry and the Dursleys. He strode toward the burning house, casting detection spells as he went. The magic in the fire was raw and powerful, fueled by strong emotion. Fear. Anger. Either way, it confirmed his long-held suspicions about Harry's potential. A middle-aged muggle woman was speaking hysterically to a police officer. And then Vernon and Petunia came running out with their boy, but I didn't see the other one, you know, the nephew they took in. Poor little thing, always looking half-starved. Dumbledore changed direction, moving toward the couple huddled near an ambulance. Vernon Dursley was red-faced, gesticulating wildly as a paramedic tried to check his minor burns. Petunia sat wrapped in a shock blanket, while Dudley was gorging himself on cookies provided by a well-meaning neighbor. Unnatural, I tell you. Vernon was saying. The boy's a menace, ought to be locked up, Mr. and Mrs. Dursley, Dumbledore interrupted, a subtle compulsion in his voice making the paramedic suddenly remember another patient who needed attention. Vernon's face went from red to purple at the sight of Dumbledore's robes. You, he bellowed. You're one of them. This is your fault. You dumped that freak on our doorstep, Vernon. Petunia hissed, looking around frantically. Not here. Dumbledore maintained his calm exterior, though inwardly, alarm bells were ringing. Where is Harry? He asked quietly. How should we know? Vernon spat. The little monster set our house on fire. With that abnormality of his. He just stood there, Petunia whispered, a hint of fear in her voice. In the middle of the flames, not burning. Just like, she cut herself off. Just like Lily, Dumbledore finished softly. Lily Potter had shown a similar affinity for fire magic in her youth, though never at this scale. Please, this is important. What happened after you left the house? We ran to Mrs. Figg's to call the fire brigade, Petunia said. When we came back, the whole street was here watching. We haven't seen the boy since. Dumbledore frowned. So he could still be inside? Vernon's mustache twitched. If we're lucky, he muttered. Dumbledore fixed him with a piercing stare, momentarily allowing his power to show. Vernon paled and looked away. Albus. McGonagall's urgent voice caught his attention. She was hurrying toward him, looking deeply troubled. The Ministry team found something. You need to see this immediately. Leaving the Dursleys, Dumbledore followed McGonagall to where a wizard in Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes robes was examining something on the ground near the burning house. Kingsley found it, Minerva explained. Just outside the front door. Kingsley Shacklebolt, already making a name for himself as a talented auror, nodded gravely. Magical residue, Albus. A portkey was activated here less than 15 minutes ago. The DMAC wizard held up a small golden object with tweezers. And this was left behind. Dumbledore's blood ran cold as he recognized the broken piece of metal, a fragment of a Gringotts transportation token. Goblins, he whispered. The goblins took Harry. Why would Gringotts intervene in an accidental magic incident? McGonagall asked, bewildered. An excellent question. Dumbledore's mind was racing through implications, none of them good. We need to get to the bank immediately. The minister will want to be informed, the DMAC wizard began. Not yet, Dumbledore cut him off. Gringotts taking magical custody of a wizard child is unprecedented and delicate. If we involve the ministry formally, it could escalate quickly. He fixed the wizard with a penetrating stare. Contain the fire, modify memories as needed, but keep the goblin involvement quiet for now. The wizard hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Dumbledore's authority as chief warlock still carried significant weight. Minerva, Kingsley, with me, Dumbledore said, already turning to find an apparition point. We have a very sensitive diplomatic situation on our hands. As they hurried away from the smoldering remains of Number 4, Dumbledore's thoughts were grim. The blood wards he'd so carefully constructed were destroyed. Harry was in goblin custody. And the carefully laid plans he'd crafted for the boy's protection were unraveling faster than he could reweave them. Whatever happened now, one thing was certain, the goblins had just changed the game entirely. Harry had never experienced anything like portkey travel before. When the spinning finally stopped and his feet touched solid ground, his knees buckled. A strong hand caught his arm, keeping him upright. First portkey? Griphook asked, looking almost sympathetic. The nausea passes quickly. Harry nodded weakly, trying to get his bearings. They stood in a vast marble hall with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Goblins in scarlet and gold uniforms moved purposefully across the polished floor, while wizards and witches in robes waited in lines before high counters. Welcome to Gringotts Bank, Mr. Potter, Sharp Fong said, removing his armor with practiced efficiency. The other goblins were doing the same, revealing smart business attire underneath. The heart of wizarding finance and the Goblin Nation's primary embassy in the magical world. Harry stared in wonder at the grandeur around him. He'd never seen anything like it. The closest comparison in his limited experience was the bank he'd glimpsed once when Uncle Vernon had reluctantly taken him along on errands. But that had been a dull, ordinary building compared to this magnificent place. It's brilliant, he breathed. Sharpfang's mouth twitched in what Harry was beginning to recognize as a smile. Indeed. Now, we must move quickly. Director Ragnarok is waiting, and we can expect wizard authorities to arrive soon. They moved briskly through the main hall, drawing curious looks from the wizards and witches conducting their business. Harry noticed some of them staring at his forehead, where his lightning bolt scar was partially visible beneath his messy hair. Sharpfang led them to a massive golden door guarded by 2 goblins in full armor, far more elaborate than what the rescue team had worn. They snapped to attention as Sharpfang approached. Senior Sharpfang, returning with the Potter heir, he announced formally. Director Ragnarok is expecting us. The guards bowed and tapped the door with long, silver-tipped staffs. The enormous door swung open silently, revealing a corridor lined with portraits of stern-looking goblins. These are the former directors of Gringotts, Griphook explained quietly as they walked. Over 7 centuries of goblin leadership. The portraits moved and whispered as Harry passed, pointing and muttering in a harsh language he didn't understand. What are they saying? Harry asked nervously. They're remarking on your magic, Sharpfang replied. It's still active around you, residual energy from the fire. Harry looked down at his hands in surprise. He couldn't see anything unusual, but when he concentrated, he could feel a faint warmth coursing beneath his skin. They reached another door, smaller but no less imposing, made of what looked like solid silver. Sharpfang knocked once, and the door opened immediately. Beyond was a circular office dominated by a crescent-shaped desk of black marble. Behind it sat the most impressive goblin Harry had seen yet. He was older than Sharpfang, with silver-white hair and piercing golden eyes. His suit was impeccably tailored, and multiple golden rings adorned his long fingers. Director Ragnarok, Sharpfang said, bowing deeply. May your gold always flow and your enemies tremble before you. May your vaults overflow and your blade never dull, Ragnarok replied, his voice surprisingly deep. His gaze shifted to Harry, sharp and assessing. So. This is Harry Potter. Harry wasn't sure what to do, so he tried a small bow like he'd seen Sharpfang perform. Sir, he said politely. Thank you for helping me. A flicker of surprise crossed Ragnarok's face, quickly masked. Unusual manners for a wizard child, he noted. Especially one raised by muggles. The Dursleys insisted on manners, Harry said quietly. They just didn't like me using them around other people. Something dangerous flashed in Ragnarok's eyes. I see. He gestured to chairs before his desk. Sit, Mr. Potter. We have much to discuss and limited time. As Harry settled into a chair, adjusted with a snap of Griphook's fingers to accommodate his small size, Ragnarok turned to Sharpfang. Report. Sharpfang outlined the morning's events concisely, the magical surge detection, their arrival at Privet Drive, the state of the fire, and their decision to remove Harry from the scene. And the muggles? Ragnarok asked. Fled before our arrival, Sharpfang replied. But based on our brief interaction with Mr. Potter and Griphook's diagnostic scan, there are strong indications of neglect, possibly abuse. Ragnarok's fingers drummed once on his desk, the only outward sign of his thoughts. Mr. Potter, he said, turning to Harry. I must ask you directly. How were you treated in that house? Harry fidgeted uncomfortably. He'd learned early never to complain about the Dursleys. They didn't want me, he said finally. Aunt Petunia always said I was a burden. Uncle Vernon gets angry a lot. Did they feed you properly? Harry shook his head. Sometimes I didn't get food for days if I did something wrong. Or if strange things happened around me. Like the fire today? Griphook asked gently. I didn't mean to. Harry said quickly, fear flashing across his face. Uncle Vernon was going to hit me, and I just got so angry, and then everything was burning, but it didn't hurt me, and I couldn't stop it. Peace, young one, Ragnarok interrupted, his tone softer than before. Accidental magic is common in magical children, especially in times of distress. Though I must say, he added with a raised eyebrow, completely destroying a house is rather impressive for a 4-year-old. Before Harry could respond, a crystal on Ragnarok's desk pulsed red. Right on schedule, the director murmured. Albus Dumbledore has arrived in the main hall, demanding to see the Potter boy. He looked at Sharpfang. Escort our young guest to the Potter Trust Manager for refreshments. I will deal with the Chief Warlock. Sharpfang bowed and gestured for Harry to follow him. As they reached the door, Ragnarok spoke again. Mr. Potter. Harry turned back. "You are now under Gringotts' protection," the Goblin director said solemnly. "No harm will come to you within these walls. You have my word." For the first time that day, perhaps for the first time he could remember, Harry felt truly safe. "Thank you, sir," he said, his small voice steady despite everything he'd been through. As the door closed behind them, Harry heard Ragnarok mutter, "Dumbledore has much to answer for." Dumbledore stood in a private meeting room off the main hall of Gringotts, maintaining his outward calm through decades of practiced patience. Inside, however, his mind was racing with calculations and contingencies. The door opened, and Director Ragnarok entered alone, his expression inscrutable as always when dealing with wizards. "Chief Warlock," the Goblin said, offering the minimal bow required by protocol. "What brings you to Gringotts with such urgency?" "I think we both know the answer to that, Director," Dumbledore replied evenly. "Where is Harry Potter?" Ragnarok took a seat, not offering one to Dumbledore, a subtle power play the wizard recognized but chose to ignore for now. "Mr. Potter is currently under Gringotts' protection, as is our right when a magical heir to significant vaults is found in danger." A rather liberal interpretation of banking regulations, Dumbledore noted. The boy was experiencing accidental magic, something the Ministry is well equipped to handle. Was he? Ragnarok's golden eyes gleamed. "Our investigation suggests Mr. Potter was in distress well before his magic manifested." "Physical distress, Chief Warlock." Dumbledore frowned. "Explain." "Our healers found evidence of long-term malnutrition. Improperly healed bones. The boy is small for his age, underweight, and shows signs of prolonged neglect." Ragnarok's voice remained businesslike, but an undercurrent of steel ran through it. Distressing conditions for any child, but particularly shocking for the heir to the ancient and noble house of Potter. A cold weight settled in Dumbledore's stomach. He'd known the Dursleys would never treat Harry as their own, but he'd counted on Petunia's blood connection to her sister to ensure basic care. Had he miscalculated so severely? "If true, these are disturbing findings," he said carefully. "But they don't justify Gringotts' unprecedented intervention. Harry must be returned to proper wizarding guardianship immediately." "Ah yes," Ragnarok said, opening a folder that appeared on the table with a snap of his fingers. "Let's discuss guardianship, shall we? According to our records, you, Albus Dumbledore, placed yourself as magical guardian after the deaths of James and Lily Potter. As Chief Warlock, it was within my authority, except," Ragnarok interrupted, "something goblins rarely did when conducting business, the Potters left a will. A will that was sealed by Wisengamot order, at your request." Dumbledore stiffened. "The will was sealed for Harry's protection." "So you claim. Yet we at Gringotts retain copies of all wills affecting our vaults. And the Potter will specifically named guardians for their son in the event of their deaths." Ragnarok's smile showed too many teeth. "Would you care to guess who was not on that list, Chief Warlock?" "The circumstances were extraordinary," Dumbledore said firmly. "Sirius Black had betrayed them and was imprisoned. The Longbottoms were attacked shortly after. Other named guardians were either casualties of war or in no position to protect the boy from remaining Death Eaters." "And Petunia Dursley?" Ragnarok asked silkily. "Was she named as a suitable guardian?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "In fact," Ragnarok continued, "our copy of the will specifically states, and I quote, 'Under no circumstances should our son Harry be placed with Petunia and Vernon Dursley, as they despise magic and would not provide a loving home.'" He closed the folder with a snap. "Curious how you overlooked that clause, isn't it?" Dumbledore took a measured breath. "I made a difficult decision in extraordinary times," he said quietly. "The blood protection afforded by Lily's sacrifice could only be anchored through her sister. It was imperfect, but it kept Harry safe from Voldemort's remaining followers. Safe from Death Eaters, perhaps," Ragnarok acknowledged. "But not safe from starvation, neglect, and whatever triggered such powerful accidental magic that it destroyed an entire house." He leaned forward. Tell me, Dumbledore, in your wisdom, did you ever once check on the boy's welfare in these 4 years? The question hit with precision accuracy. Dumbledore had monitored the blood wards, yes. He'd stationed Arabella Fig nearby to keep a distant eye on Harry. But direct contact? No. He'd deemed it too risky, potentially drawing attention to Harry's location. I had measures in place, he said finally. Clearly insufficient ones, Ragnarok replied. Now, Gringotts finds itself in an unusual position. A magical heir to one of our most valued accounts has been discovered in an abusive environment, placed there illegally against his parents' explicit wishes. Our charter and treaties give us clear authority to intervene to protect our client's interests. You cannot seriously intend to keep Harry Potter in Gringotts, Dumbledore said, allowing a hint of his power to color his words. Ragnarok seemed unimpressed. Perhaps not indefinitely. But until his proper guardianship is resolved according to his parents' wishes? Absolutely. The wizarding world will not accept, the wizarding world, Ragnarok cut in sharply, placed their savior on a muggle doorstep and forgot about him for 4 years. Your ministry didn't even conduct the standard welfare checks required for magical children in muggle environments. His voice took on a formal quality. Gringotts has invoked Clause 7 of the Treaty of 1612, protective custody of a magical heir in clear danger. We will retain custody of Mr. Potter until a wizarding court reviews his parents' will and assigns proper guardianship. Dumbledore recognized the legal maneuver for what it was, a masterful check in their ongoing chess match. Clause 7 was rarely invoked but legally binding. Fighting it would require revealing the sealed will and his decision to place Harry with the Dursleys against the Potter's wishes. And if I were to insist, he asked quietly. Ragnarok's expression hardened. Then Gringotts would be forced to call an emergency session of the International Confederation, citing breach of the Goblin treaties. We would present evidence of the Potter heir's condition upon rescue from his Muggle relatives, along with the contents of his parents' will. He paused meaningfully. I imagine the international reaction to learning how Britain has treated their celebrated boy who lived would be quite dramatic. Checkmate, for now. Dumbledore inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the Goblin's play. I would like to see Harry, he said. To ensure he's unharmed from today's events. Mr. Potter is currently being seen by our healers and getting much-needed nourishment, Ragnarok replied. Once he is settled, if he wishes to see you, it can be arranged. If he wishes? Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. He's 4 years old, Director. Old enough to have opinions about who he wants in his presence, Ragnarok countered. Particularly after such a traumatic day. Dumbledore knew when to make a strategic retreat. Very well. Please inform Harry that I'm concerned for his welfare and available when he feels ready to talk. He rose to leave, then paused. Director Ragnarok, whatever our differences, I hope we can agree that Harry's safety is paramount. There are dangers in his future that you may not fully comprehend. If you refer to the prophecy, Ragnarok said casually, we goblins have our own seers and our own understanding of what may come. At Dumbledore's surprised look, he added, did you think Lily Potter, brilliant witch that she was, would entrust her family's finances to us without ensuring we understood what was at stake? Dumbledore reassessed the situation rapidly. If the goblins knew about the prophecy, or even part of it, then you understand why certain precautions are necessary, he said carefully. We understand that a child with a great destiny requires proper preparation, Ragnarok corrected. Not neglect disguised as protection. He stood, signaling the end of their meeting. Rest assured, Albus Dumbledore, the Potter heir will be safe with us. Whether your plans for him will proceed as you wish, that remains to be seen. As Dumbledore left Gringotts, he felt the weight of miscalculation heavy on his shoulders. For 4 years, his focus had been on the big picture, keeping Harry alive, protected by blood magic, away from fame and influence until he was ready. He'd considered the Dursleys' treatment an unfortunate but necessary sacrifice for the greater good. Now, that decision had backfired spectacularly. The goblins held Harry, the blood wards were destroyed, and the carefully constructed protections he'd built around the boy were crumbling. And yet, a small voice in his mind whispered that perhaps this wasn't entirely negative. Harry's magical display had been extraordinary for a child his age. The goblins, whatever their motives, would certainly ensure he was properly cared for. And while Dumbledore had lost direct control, he hadn't lost influence entirely. The game had changed, but it was far from over. He would need to adapt, to find new paths forward that accommodated this unexpected turn. As he stepped into the sunlight of Diagon Alley, Albus Dumbledore began to plan. While wizarding authorities and goblin leadership engaged in their political chess match, Harry Potter sat in a comfortable room deep within Gringotts, experiencing the first real care he could remember. The room wasn't large, but to Harry it seemed enormous compared to his cupboard. A plush bed with emerald green coverings dominated one wall, while a cheerful fire, normal orange, not the strange blue-green of his accidental magic, crackled in a small fireplace. A table laden with food had been set up, and Harry was currently working his way through a bowl of rich beef stew while Griphook kept him company. "Slow down," the young goblin advised, watching Harry shovel food into his mouth. "You'll make yourself sick eating so quickly after going hungry." Harry reluctantly slowed his pace, but couldn't stop entirely. The stew was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted, far better than the scraps he usually got at the Dursleys'. "Sorry," he mumbled around a mouthful of bread. "It's just so good." Griphook's expression softened slightly. "There's plenty more. No one will take it away from you." Harry wasn't entirely convinced of that. Experience had taught him that good things didn't last, but he tried to eat more carefully nonetheless. As he finished the stew, the door opened, and a female goblin entered. She was shorter than Sharp Fong or Griphook, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Potter," she said briskly. "I am Healer Silverfong. I need to examine you to ensure you're healthy after today's excitement." Harry tensed immediately, memories of school nurses who'd asked too many questions about his bruises flashing through his mind. Those visits had always ended badly once Uncle Vernon found out. Griphook noticed his discomfort. "Goblin healing is different from what you might have experienced before," he explained. "Healer Silverfong will use magic to check your health. It won't hurt." Still cautious, Harry nodded reluctantly. "Okay." Silverfong approached, holding what looked like a crystal wand. "Hold still, please," she instructed, before passing the wand over Harry's body in smooth, practiced movements. The crystal glowed different colors as it moved, mostly blue and green, but occasionally flashing red or yellow. Silverfang's expression grew increasingly grim as the examination continued. "Malnutrition, as expected," she muttered. "Poorly healed fracture in the right arm. Vision impairment uncorrected. Growth stunting beginning." She looked up at Griphook. The Muggles did not care for him properly. "We suspected as much," Griphook replied quietly. Harry stared at his hands, shame washing over him though he couldn't understand why. It wasn't his fault the Dursleys hadn't wanted him. Was it? "Mr. Potter," Silverfong said, her voice gentler than before. "I need to give you some medicines to help your body recover. Some might taste unpleasant, but they will help you grow strong." "Like vitamins?" Harry asked tentatively. He'd seen Aunt Petunia give Dudley vitamin tablets occasionally, though never him. "Similar, but much more effective," Silverfong said with a hint of pride. "Goblin healing potions are the finest in the magical world, though wizards rarely admit it." She produced several vials from her bag, each containing liquids of different colors. "This blue one first. It will strengthen your bones." Harry obediently drank the potion, surprised to find it tasted like blueberries. "The second potion, for his eyes," Silverfong explained, tasted like honey, while the third, for nutrition, was less pleasant, with a flavor like very strong spinach. As he finished the last potion, the door opened again. Sharpfong entered, followed by a goblin Harry hadn't met before, distinguished-looking with spectacles and formal attire. "Mr. Potter," Sharpfang said. "This is Barchoke, the Potter accounts manager. He has been overseeing your family's finances since before you were born." Barchoke gave a formal little bow. "An honor to finally meet you, Herr Potter. Your father spoke often of you during our meetings." Harry's head snapped up. "You knew my dad?" "Indeed," Barchoke said, taking a seat at the table. "James Potter was a valued client and, would venture to say, a friend, insofar as goblins and wizards form such relationships." "Can you tell me about him?" Harry asked eagerly. "About my mum too?" Aunt Petunia never talked about them, except to say they died in a car crash and were freaks. A ripple of anger passed through the room. The goblins exchanged dark looks. "A car crash?" Barchoke repeated, outrage evident in his voice. "They told you Lily and James Potter died in a mundane accident?" Harry shrank back slightly, worried he'd said something wrong. Sharpfang placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've done nothing wrong, Mr. Potter. We're angry at the deception, not at you." Barchoke composed himself with visible effort. "Mr. Potter, Harry, your parents were murdered by a dark wizard called Voldemort. They died protecting you, and through means not fully understood, you survived the killing curse that took their lives. That scar on your forehead is the mark of that survival." Harry's small hand went automatically to his lightning bolt scar. "Magic is real," he whispered. "That's what I did today with the fire." "Very much so," Barchoke confirmed. "You are a wizard, Harry, just as your parents were a wizard and witch. The Dursleys knew this. Your aunt was your mother's sister and grew up watching Lily's magic develop." "They said magic wasn't real," Harry said, his voice small. "That I was a freak when weird things happened around me." "They lied," Sharpfang said bluntly. "Magic is very real, and you have it in abundance, as today's events demonstrated." Harry's mind was whirling with revelations. Magic was real. His parents hadn't died in a car crash. They'd been murdered protecting him. And he, somehow, was famous for surviving. "What happens to me now?" he asked finally. "I can't go back to the Dursleys, can I? Their house is gone." He couldn't keep the hopeful note out of his voice. "No, you certainly won't be returning to those muggles," Barchoke said firmly. "Director Ragnarok has invoked an ancient treaty clause that allows Gringotts to take temporary custody of you as the Potter heir." "What does that mean?" Harry asked, confused. "It means," Sharpfang explained, "that you will stay here at Gringotts until proper arrangements can be made for your care. Arrangements that honor your parents' wishes, not the plans of Albus Dumbledore." "Who's Dumbledore?" The goblins exchanged looks again, this time calculating rather than angry. "A powerful wizard," Barchoke said carefully. "The headmaster of Hogwarts School, where you'll attend when you're older. He was the one who placed you with the Dursleys after your parents died." Harry frowned. "He put me with people who hated me?" "It appears so," Sharpfang said, watching Harry closely. "He claims it was for your protection." "Didn't work very well," Harry muttered, thinking of Uncle Vernon's meaty fists and Dudley's games of Harry hunting. "No," Barchoke agreed. "It did not. Which is why we've intervened." He straightened, his manner becoming more businesslike. "Now, as your account manager, I should inform you that while you can't access your full inheritance until you're 17, the Potter Trust Vault provides a substantial allowance for your care and education." Harry blinked in surprise. "I have money." "The Potters were one of Britain's wealthiest wizarding families," Barchoke said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Your trust vault alone would support you comfortably for decades, and that's merely a fraction of your full inheritance." This was almost too much to process. In the space of a day, Harry had gone from unwanted burden to heir of a wealthy magical family. From sleeping in a cupboard to having goblins fight for his welfare. "Dumbledore is here," Sharpfang said, turning to Harry. "He wants to see you," but Director Ragnarok has made it clear that the choice is yours. Harry hesitated. This Dumbledore had put him with the Dursleys, knowing they hated magic. But maybe he'd had good reasons. Adults always said they had reasons for things that hurt. "Will you stay with me if I see him?" he asked Sharpfang. The goblin nodded. "If that's what you wish." Harry took a deep breath. "Okay. I'll see him." Dumbledore had been waiting for nearly an hour when a young goblin finally came to escort him deeper into Gringotts. The delay was a power play, he knew, but he accepted it graciously. When dealing with goblins, patience was essential. He was led through corridors he'd never seen before. Gringotts was far larger underground than most wizards realized, extending deep beneath London in a labyrinth of offices, vaults, and goblin living quarters. Finally, they stopped before a simple wooden door. "The Potter heir has agreed to see you," his escort said. "Senior Sharpfang will be present throughout the meeting." Dumbledore nodded his understanding. "Thank you for arranging this." The goblin gave him an assessing look before opening the door. Inside was a comfortable sitting room where Harry Potter sat in an armchair that had clearly been resized for him. Beside him stood Sharpfang, looking every inch the protective guardian. "Harry," Dumbledore said warmly, moving into the room. "I'm so relieved to see you're safe." The boy regarded him warily, green eyes, Lily's eyes, watching from behind broken glasses. He was small for his age, Dumbledore noted with concern, his clothes clearly hand-me-down several sizes too large. "Are you Dumbledore?" Harry asked directly. "I am," he confirmed, taking a seat across from Harry when Sharpfang indicated he could do so. "Professor Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." "They said you put me with the Dursleys," Harry continued, his young voice remarkably steady. "Why?" "No pleasantries, no awe at meeting a famous wizard. Just straight to the heart of the matter." Dumbledore suppressed a smile. Lily had been much the same, cutting through pretense to the core of an issue. "It's complicated, Harry," he began gently. "When your parents died, there were still many dangerous people who might have wished you harm. Your mother's sacrifice created a powerful protection through her blood, a protection that could be maintained through your aunt, her only blood relative." Harry frowned, considering this. "So I had to live with Aunt Petunia to be safe from bad wizards?" "That's correct," Dumbledore said, relieved at the boy's quick understanding. "The blood wards around Privet Drive kept you hidden and protected." "But not protected from Uncle Vernon," Harry said quietly. "Or Aunt Petunia. Or Dudley." Dumbledore felt the words like a physical blow. "I had hoped your aunt would treat you as her own," he admitted. "Family is supposed to care for one another." "They didn't," Harry said simply. "They called me freak and made me sleep in the cupboard under the stairs. Dudley got 2 bedrooms, and I got a cupboard with spiders." Each word increased the weight of guilt on Dumbledore's shoulders. He had suspected neglect, yes, but this. "I am truly sorry, Harry," he said, his voice heavy with genuine regret. "I made a mistake in placing you there without proper checks on your welfare." Harry studied him, head tilted slightly. "Sharpfang says I don't have to go back. Is that true?" "Yes," Dumbledore confirmed. "The house is destroyed, and given what I've learned today, I would not send you back in any case." Some tension seemed to leave Harry's small frame. "Good," he said firmly. "I don't ever want to see them again." "Understandable," Dumbledore agreed. "The question now is what arrangements should be made for your care going forward." Sharpfang stepped forward slightly. "Gringotts has already begun reviewing the Potter will to identify appropriate guardians as specified by James and Lily Potter. A process that could take time," Dumbledore noted. In the interim, Sharpfang interrupted smoothly, "Heir Potter will remain under Gringotts' protection, as is our right under Clause 7. Harry looked between them, clearly sensing the underlying tension. "Can I stay here?" he asked. "Everyone's been nice to me, and Healer Silver Fang says I need special potions to help me grow properly. Dumbledore saw the calculation in Sharpfang's eyes. The goblin hadn't expected Harry to express a preference for staying at Gringotts. Most wizard children would be intimidated by the bank's austere atmosphere. Gringotts is a financial institution, not a home for children, Dumbledore said gently. While I'm sure the goblins have been very kind, there are wizarding families who would gladly welcome you, families you would select? Sharpfang asked pointedly. Families who could provide a proper wizarding upbringing, Dumbledore countered. I like it here, Harry insisted, a stubborn set to his jaw that was pure James Potter. No one yells at me or calls me freak. I get enough food. And Barchoke said he knew my dad and can tell me stories about my parents. Dumbledore recognized defeat when he saw it. Pushing harder now would only alienate Harry further. Perhaps a compromise, he suggested. Harry could remain at Gringotts temporarily while appropriate guardianship is arranged according to his parents' wishes. I would request regular visits to ensure his education in wizarding matters continues appropriately. Sharpfang considered this. Acceptable, provided Herr Potter wishes to see you. And provided, came Director Ragnarok's voice from the doorway, that Gringotts' role in determining appropriate guardianship is respected. Dumbledore turned to see the Goblin Director entering the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. Director, he acknowledged with a respectful nod. I believe we're reaching an understanding. Are we? Ragnarok approached Harry's chair. Mr. Potter, are you comfortable with this arrangement? Staying at Gringotts while we sort out your future care. Harry nodded eagerly. Yes, please. Can I learn about magic too? And my family? Absolutely, Ragnarok assured him. We have already assigned tutors for your basic education, and Barchoke will share what he knows of your family history. To Dumbledore, he added, we are not wizards, but we understand the importance of magical education. Herr Potter will not fall behind his peers. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than an open conflict with the Goblin nation. And perhaps, Dumbledore mused, there were advantages to Harry receiving education outside the ministry's traditional structure. Then we are agreed, he said, rising from his seat. Harry will remain at Gringotts for now, with regular check-ins from myself or my deputy headmistress, while permanent guardianship is arranged. Agreed, Ragnarok said, with the air of one who knows they've won the more significant victory. Dumbledore turned to Harry one last time. Is there anything you need, my boy? Anything I can bring you on my next visit? Harry thought for a moment. Could I have some books about magic? And maybe. He hesitated, then continued in a smaller voice, maybe a picture of my parents. I've never seen what they looked like. The request pierced through Dumbledore's carefully maintained composure. This child, famous throughout the wizarding world, didn't even know his parents' faces. I will bring both, he promised softly. You have my word. As Dumbledore left Gringotts, his mind turned to the new reality he faced. Harry Potter, raised by goblins, at least temporarily. The carefully laid plans of years, now requiring significant revision. The prophecy, still looming over all. Yet despite the complications, he couldn't deny a certain relief. The boy would be safe, well-fed, and educated. The neglect he'd suffered would be addressed. And perhaps most importantly, Harry had shown remarkable resilience and clarity for a child his age. Different paths could still lead to necessary destinations, Dumbledore reminded himself. The game had changed, but the pieces were still in play. And Harry Potter, despite everything, would be ready when his time came. That night, Harry lay in the most comfortable bed he'd ever experienced, staring up at the stone ceiling of his room in Gringotts. The day's events swirled through his mind like the strange blue fire he'd somehow created. Magic was real. He was a wizard. His parents had been murdered, not killed in a car crash. He was famous for surviving something called the killing curse. He had money, lots of it, apparently. And the Dursleys had lied about everything. It was almost too much to process. Yet amid the confusion and revelations, one fact stood out clearly: he never had to go back to Privet Drive. Never again would he sleep in a cupboard, or go hungry because of accidental magic, or serve as Dudley's punching bag. For the first time in his young life, Harry Potter felt something unfamiliar warming his chest: hope. Real, sustainable hope, not the fleeting wishes he'd made in his cupboard that someone might come and take him away. Someone had come. Not the way he'd imagined, not a long-lost relative or a friend of his parents, but strange, fierce creatures who seemed determined to protect him. Goblins. He was being protected by goblins, in a magic bank beneath London. It sounded like something from one of the storybooks at school that he'd sometimes sneak peeks at during lunch. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, sitting up in bed. Griphook entered, carrying a small wooden box. "Apologies for disturbing your rest, Mr. Potter, but Director Ragnarok thought you might wish to have this tonight rather than waiting until morning." He placed the box on the bed beside Harry. It was made of dark wood, polished to a high shine, with the letter P inlaid in gold on the lid. "What is it?" Harry asked, touching the box cautiously. "It comes from your family vault," Griphook explained. "Your mother created it for you before they went into hiding. It was to be given to you when you entered the wizarding world. Director Ragnarok felt that time is now." With trembling fingers, Harry lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on dark blue velvet, was a simple silver frame containing a wizard photograph, for the people in it were moving, smiling and waving at him. His parents. They had to be. The man looked so much like Harry himself, the same unruly black hair, the same jawline, though his eyes were different. And the woman. Harry touched the photo reverently, tracing her smiling face. She had his eyes, exactly his eyes, and her red hair seemed to catch the light as she moved. They were holding a baby, him, and they looked so happy, so proud. The woman kept pressing kisses to baby Harry's head, while the man beamed and waved at the camera. "There's something else," Griphook said softly, indicating a folded piece of parchment beneath the frame. Harry carefully lifted out the photograph and took the parchment, unfolding it with care. The handwriting was elegant and flowing: "To our darling Harry, if you're reading this, then our worst fears have come true, and we are no longer with you. Know that we loved you more than anything in this world, enough to give our lives to protect yours if necessary. We've asked that this box be given to you when you first enter the magical world, so you can carry a piece of us with you on your journey. The photograph is charmed to be indestructible, your father insisted after you tried to eat the first version, and we've included a few other small treasures in the compartment beneath. Whoever is caring for you now, we hope they have told you how much we loved you. How you made our lives complete. How your first word, pads, for your godfather Sirius, much to your father's dismay, made us laugh for days. How you would zoom around on the toy broomstick Sirius gave you, terrorizing the cat and making your father so proud he could burst. We don't know what the future holds, my love, but we know you will face it with courage and compassion. You are our greatest creation, our most perfect magic. All our love, forever and always, Mom and Dad, Lily and James Potter." Harry didn't realize he was crying until a tear splashed onto the parchment. He wiped it away quickly, afraid of damaging the letter, but the ink didn't smudge or run. Magic, he realized. It was protected by magic, just like the photograph. "There's a hidden compartment," Griphook said gently, showing Harry how to press a specific spot on the box's interior. The velvet bottom slid aside, revealing several small objects: a tiny golden snitch, a delicate charm bracelet with lily flowers, a small stuffed black dog that looked well loved, and a key with the Gringotts emblem. "The key is to your personal vault," Griphook explained. "Separate from the main Potter vaults or your trust vault. Your mother created it specifically for personal items she wanted preserved for you." Harry picked up the tiny stuffed dog, feeling its soft fabric against his fingers. Had he once carried this everywhere? Had his mother tucked it beside him in his crib? "Thank you," he whispered, not just to Griphook but to Director Ragnarok, to his parents, to whatever twist of fate had brought him to this moment. "Rest well, Mr. Potter," Griphook said, moving toward the door. "Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities." After the goblin left, Harry arranged the photograph on the small table beside his bed, where it would be the first thing he'd see upon waking. He tucked the stuffed dog against his pillow and carefully refolded his mother's letter, placing it back in the box with the other treasures. As he settled back under the covers, Harry felt the day's emotional exhaustion catching up with him. But for the first time in memory, he fell asleep not with dread for tomorrow, but with curiosity and hope. His last thought before drifting off was that maybe, just maybe, burning down Privet Drive had been the best thing he'd ever done. Chapter 2, Forged in Magic, Parry. Counter. Now strike. Harry ducked under the wooden training sword, feeling it whoosh over his head by mere centimeters. He pivoted on his right foot, bringing his own practice blade up in a swift arc that his opponent barely blocked in time. "Good!" Battlemaster Gornik barked. "Again. Faster this time." At 11 years old, Harry Potter no longer resembled the malnourished, frightened child who had been rescued from Privet Drive 7 years ago. Though still small for his age, Healer Silverfong blamed the early malnutrition that even her potions couldn't fully reverse. He moved with a dancer's grace and a fighter's precision. His black hair remained untamable, but now it was worn longer, tied back in a simple queue that mimicked his goblin instructors. The lightning bolt scar on his forehead was partly hidden by a copper circlet, a gift from Director Ragnarok on his 10th birthday, enchanted to help organize his thoughts during meditation. Harry feinted left, then spun right, catching Gornik's wooden blade with his own and executing a perfect disarming maneuver that sent the practice weapon clattering across the stone floor. "Ha!" Harry grinned, breathing hard but triumphant. "That's 2 out of 3. Gornik's weathered face broke into what humans might mistake for a grimace but Harry recognized as a proud smile. "You've been practicing those footwork drills I assigned." "Every morning before dawn," Harry confirmed, wiping sweat from his brow. "Sharpclaw thinks I'm mad, doing battle drills before breakfast." "Sharpclaw is an accountant," Gornik snorted. "What does he know of a warrior's discipline?" Harry laughed, returning his practice sword to the weapons rack with a respectful bow. Even after 7 years, he found the goblin hierarchy fascinating, the clear divisions between warriors, crafters, financiers, and leadership, all working in harmony despite their different approaches. "Speaking of discipline," Gornik continued, checking the time on an ornate pocket watch, "aren't you due for arithmancy with Master Flintlock at 9 bells?" Harry's eyes widened. "Blast! You're right." He quickly gathered his training gear. "Same time tomorrow?" "If your other studies permit," Gornik agreed. "Though I heard whispers that Director Ragnarok wishes to see you this afternoon." That made Harry pause. "Ragnarok? Did he say why?" "When the director of Gringotts wishes to speak with you, boy, the why is his business until he chooses to share it." Despite the stern words, there was affection in Gornik's tone. Harry was something of a favorite among many of the goblins who'd watched him grow from a scared child into a capable young man who respected their ways. Harry nodded, acknowledging the gentle rebuke. "Of course. Thank you for today's lesson, Battlemaster." He hurried from the training room, navigating the twisting corridors of Gringotts' living quarters with practiced ease. Few wizards knew just how vast the bank was beneath the surface, a veritable city of goblins thriving below London streets. In the 7 years since his arrival, Harry had explored more of it than any human in centuries, though there were still areas restricted to full-blooded goblins only. Rushing into his chamber, Harry quickly washed and changed from his training clothes into a more appropriate outfit for academic lessons: charcoal gray trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a dark blue vest embroidered with subtle silver runes of focus and clarity, a gift from his etiquette instructor, Mistress Silvertongue, who insisted proper attire influenced proper thinking. His room had evolved as he'd grown. No longer the simple guest chamber of his first days, it now reflected both his human heritage and his goblin upbringing. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with texts on magical theory, goblin history, financial management, and defensive magic. His bed was still draped in emerald green, but now the Potter family crest had been embroidered on the canopy, a reminder of the legacy he would one day fully claim. On the bedside table, in the same silver frame, his parents still smiled and waved at him. Over the years, he'd added other photographs, himself at age 7 standing proudly beside Director Ragnarok after his first successful vault inspection, Harry and Griphook, now one of his closest friends despite their 5-year age difference, exploring a deep cavern on Harry's first approved adventure outside the bank, Harry being presented with his first real sword on his 10th birthday, a ceremonial blade that recognized him as a friend of the Goblin Nation. But there was no time for nostalgia now. Grabbing his arithmancy texts and notes, Harry hurried back into the corridor, taking a series of shortcuts known only to longtime residents. He slid into Master Flintlock's classroom just as the bell chimed 9 times. Cutting it close, young Potter, Flintlock observed without looking up from the complex equation he was writing on the board. The elderly goblin had a reputation for being able to sense his students' arrivals through some mysterious means he refused to explain. "Apologies, Master," Harry said, taking his seat at the single desk in the room. Most of his education was one-on-one, given the rarity of human students in Gringotts. "We left off discussing the magical properties of the number 7, Flintlock said, finishing his equation with a flourish. "Today we'll examine how those properties influence ward construction in." Harry's mind briefly wandered as Flintlock launched into his lecture. Not because he wasn't interested, arithmancy was actually one of his favorite subjects, but because Gornik's mention of Ragnarok wanting to see him had stirred a ripple of concern. The director rarely requested Harry's presence formally these days. Their relationship had evolved over the years into something almost familial, with Harry joining Ragnarok for dinner once a week and sometimes just dropping by the director's office when he had questions only Ragnarok could answer. A formal summons suggested something significant had occurred. "Mr. Potter," Flintlock's voice cut through his thoughts, "if my lesson is boring you, perhaps you'd prefer to demonstrate yesterday's principles at the board?" Harry snapped back to attention. "No, Master Flintlock. I was distracted, and it won't happen again." The goblin's stern expression softened slightly. "See that it doesn't. Now, as I was saying about the interaction between 7-pointed ward schemas and lunar phases." This time, Harry focused completely on the lesson, taking detailed notes and asking clarifying questions at appropriate intervals. Whatever Ragnarok wanted, he'd find out soon enough. By early afternoon, Harry had completed his arithmancy lesson, eaten a quick lunch with Griphook, and attended his weekly session with healer Silverfang, who still monitored his health closely. Now he stood before the imposing silver door of Director Ragnarok's office, straightening his vest nervously before knocking. "Enter," came Ragnarok's deep voice. The office hadn't changed much over the years, the same black marble desk, the same artifacts of goblin history carefully displayed in warded cases, the same enchanted window showing a view of mountains that Harry knew existed far from London. What had changed was how Harry perceived the space. What had once seemed intimidating now felt familiar, almost comforting. "You wish to see me, Director?" Harry said formally, giving the slight bow that goblin protocol demanded when entering a superior's office. Ragnarok wasn't alone. Barchoke, Harry's account manager, stood nearby with an envelope in his hands. And there, somewhat surprisingly, sat Professor Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry had met McGonagall several times over the years during her occasional visits to check on his education, as part of the agreement with Dumbledore. While always proper and a bit stern, she'd been kind to him, bringing books about transfiguration, her specialty, and sometimes sharing stories about his parents, who had been her students. "Harry," Ragnarok said, his formal demeanor relaxing slightly, "thank you for coming promptly. Please, sit." Harry took the offered chair, nodding respectfully to both Barchoke and McGonagall. "Professor, it's good to see you again." "And you, Mr. Potter," she replied with a small smile. "You seem to be thriving." "I am, thank you." He turned back to Ragnarok, curiosity evident in his expression. "Is something wrong?" Not wrong, Ragnar said carefully. But we've reached an important juncture in your life. He nodded to Barchoke, who stepped forward and handed the envelope to Harry. It was made of yellowish parchment, heavy and expensive feeling. On the front, written in emerald green ink, was, Mr. H. Potter, the Bronze Chamber, Gringotts Wizarding Bank, London. Harry turned it over, seeing a purple wax seal bearing a coat of arms, a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding the letter H. My Hogwarts letter, he said softly. It wasn't a question. Indeed, McGonagall confirmed. Normally these are sent by owl, but given your unique living situation, I thought it best to deliver it personally. Harry broke the seal and removed the letter inside, reading quickly, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF, Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confede, of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Harry looked up from the letter, meeting Ragnar's gaze. They'd discussed Hogwarts before, of course. Harry had always known he would eventually attend the wizarding school. But now that the moment had arrived, he felt suddenly conflicted. This is where the juncture I mentioned comes into play, Ragnar said, reading Harry's expression with the ease of long familiarity. Your Hogwarts education was always part of the plan. However, circumstances have evolved since you first came to us. Harry understood what wasn't being said. He'd been meant to stay at Gringotts temporarily, a few months, perhaps a year at most, while proper guardianship was arranged according to his parents' will. But complications had arisen. Sirius Black, his godfather, remained in Azkaban for supposedly betraying his parents, though Barchoke had discovered disturbing irregularities in the case. Remus Lupin, another friend of his parents, was prevented from taking guardianship due to his lycanthropy. The Longbottoms were still in St. Mungo's. And other potential guardians had either died in the war, left the country, or been deemed unsuitable for various reasons. So Harry had stayed at Gringotts, his temporary residence becoming increasingly permanent as the years passed. The Goblins, initially motivated by financial and political considerations, had gradually become genuinely invested in his well-being. And Harry had grown to love his unusual home and family. You're worried about me going to Hogwarts, Harry said, looking from Ragnar to Barchoke. About how I'll be treated. Barchoke cleared his throat. We have concerns, yes. You've been raised with goblin values and perspectives that many in wizarding society do not share or understand. What Barchoke means, McGonagall interjected with surprising gentleness, is that your upbringing has been unorthodox by wizarding standards. While I've been satisfied with your academic progress during my assessment visits, there may be cultural adjustments to consider. Harry appreciated her tact. What none of them were saying directly was that prejudice against goblins ran deep in wizarding society, and a wizard child raised by goblins would face scrutiny and likely hostility from some quarters. I understand, Harry said. But I've always known I'd attend Hogwarts eventually. My parents went there. And he hesitated, then continued more confidently, and I need to understand both worlds. I'm not a goblin, whatever values I've learned here. But I'm not exactly a typical wizard either. Ragnar's expression softened, pride evident in his golden eyes. Well reasoned, Harry. This is precisely why we've called this meeting, not to discourage you from attending Hogwarts, but to ensure you're prepared for what awaits. We've arranged a partial solution to the guardianship issue, Barchoke explained. A temporary magical guardianship shared between Director Ragnar and Professor McGonagall while you're at Hogwarts. McGonagall nodded. I'll be responsible for your welfare at school, while Director Ragnar maintains his authority when you're away from Hogwarts. This compromise was not easily reached with the Ministry, but given your unique situation, exceptions were made. Harry suspected exceptions were made was a polite way of saying political pressure was applied. The Goblins had likely leveraged their considerable financial influence, while Dumbledore had probably used his own political capital to make this arrangement possible. "What about holidays?" Harry asked. "Can I return to Gringotts?" "This will be your home for as long as you wish it," Ragnarok said firmly. "Your chamber will remain as you leave it, and you're welcome during all school breaks." However, his tone grew more serious. "While at Hogwarts, you must be mindful of what you share about your life here. Goblin security is paramount, I know," Harry finished. "I wouldn't betray your trust by revealing sensitive information." "It's not just about secrets, Harry," Barchoke said quietly. "It's about your safety as well. There are those in Wizarding Society who would not look kindly on our arrangement." Harry had been taught enough Wizarding history, the real history, not the sanitized version in Ministry-approved textbooks, to understand what Barchoke meant. The Goblin rebellions might have ended centuries ago, but the underlying tensions remained. A human child raised by goblins would be seen by some as a disturbing anomaly at best, a potential threat at worst. "I'll be careful," he promised. "I know how to blend in when needed." The Goblin security training he'd received had included lessons in observation and discretion that would serve him well now. "There's one more matter to address," McGonagall said, glancing at Ragnarok as if seeking permission to continue. When he nodded, she turned back to Harry. "Your fame in the wizarding world." Harry grimaced. The boy who lived. The infant hero who had somehow vanquished the Dark Lord. He'd learned about his unwanted celebrity status years ago, but the Goblins had sheltered him from its full impact. "Everyone will know who I am," he said. "They will," McGonagall confirmed. "Your arrival at Hogwarts has been anticipated for years. There will be staring, whispers, attempts to befriend you for your fame rather than yourself. Some will expect a mythical hero, others will look for weaknesses to exploit. Not to mention those with political agendas," Barchoke added delicately. Harry nodded, understanding the subtext. Dumbledore had his own plans. The Ministry would have its interests. And somewhere out there, supporters of Voldemort might still pose a threat. So basically, Harry summarized with a hint of the dry humor he'd developed living among goblins, "I need to be alert for danger, careful what I reveal, mindful of everyone's hidden motives, and somehow still act like a normal 11-year-old student." McGonagall's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "That is a rather succinct summary of the situation, Mr. Potter." Harry sighed, then straightened his shoulders. "Well, I have faced worse challenges." He looked directly at Ragnarok. "You taught me that adversity reveals character. I won't let any of you down." "We know you won't," Ragnarok said, a rare warmth in his voice. "Now, I believe it's customary to respond to a Hogwarts acceptance letter." Harry picked up a quill from Ragnarok's desk, dipped it in ink, and wrote his acceptance on the parchment McGonagall provided. As he signed his name, he felt as though he were crossing a threshold, stepping from the safety of his goblin sanctuary into the wider, more complicated wizarding world. "There's the matter of your school supplies," McGonagall said, accepting the letter. "Normally, first-year students visit Diagon Alley with their parents or guardians. Given your situation, I would like to go to Diagon Alley," Harry interrupted, more forcefully than he'd intended. Seeing McGonagall's raised eyebrow, he moderated his tone. "Sorry, Professor. It's just. I've only been outside Gringotts on special occasions, and always with heavy security. I'd like to experience Diagon Alley like a normal student would." He glanced at Ragnarok. "With reasonable precautions, of course." Ragnarok and McGonagall exchanged looks. "It would be good preparation for his transition to Hogwarts," McGonagall suggested. With appropriate supervision, Ragnarok agreed reluctantly. "Griphook has been requesting a field assignment. He could accompany Harry while maintaining a discreet distance. And I could meet them at key locations," McGonagall added. "The wand shop, for instance. Ollivander can be Overwhelming for first-time customers. Harry watched this exchange with growing excitement. After years of limited, carefully controlled excursions, he was finally going to experience the wizarding world properly. "When can we go?" he asked eagerly. "Tomorrow," Ragnarok decided. Best to handle this promptly, before word spreads that Harry Potter has received his Hogwarts letter. He fixed Harry with a stern look. "You will follow Griphook's security protocols without question. Is that understood?" "Yes, Director," Harry agreed immediately. "Very well." Ragnarok stood, signaling the meeting's end. "Professor McGonagall, thank you for delivering the letter personally. We appreciate the courtesy." "Of course, Director," McGonagall replied, rising as well. "Mr. Potter, I'll see you tomorrow at Ollivander's shop at 11 o'clock. She gave him a rare smile. "I look forward to having you at Hogwarts. Your parents would be proud of the young man you're becoming." After McGonagall departed, Harry remained with Ragnarok and Barchoke. An uncomfortable silence settled over the office. "You're both worried," Harry said finally. "More than you're letting on." Barchoke sighed. "We've protected you as best we could, Harry. But Hogwarts will place you firmly in wizarding society, and in Albus Dumbledore's sphere of influence." "Dumbledore's not evil," Harry pointed out. "Misguided about some things, maybe, but not evil." "Evil?" "No," Ragnarok agreed. "But he is a wizard who believes absolutely in his own vision of the greater good. Such certainty can be more dangerous than malice when wielded with his level of power and influence." Harry couldn't argue with that. His periodic meetings with Dumbledore over the years had left him with complicated feelings about the headmaster. On one hand, Dumbledore had always been kind and seemed genuinely concerned for Harry's welfare. On the other, there was a calculating quality to his kindness, as if Harry were a particularly important chess piece that needed to be carefully positioned. "I'll be careful around him too," Harry promised. "I've learned from the best about seeing beyond surface appearances." He grinned suddenly. After all, who's better at spotting deception than the bankers who catch wizard counterfeiters? That broke the tension, drawing reluctant smiles from both goblins. "Go on, then," Ragnarok said, making a shooing gesture. "I'm sure you're eager to tell Griphook about tomorrow's expedition." Harry stood, bowing respectfully before heading to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle, looking back at the two goblins who had become the closest thing to family he'd known. "Thank you," he said simply. "For everything." Then he was gone, racing through the corridors to find Griphook and share the news. Ragnarok and Barchoke exchanged glances. "He'll face challenges we couldn't prepare him for," Barchoke said quietly. "Yes," Ragnarok agreed. "But he'll face them with a foundation neither Dumbledore nor the Dark Lord's supporters could anticipate." A fierce pride entered his voice. He may wear a wizard's robes, but his heart was forged in goblin fire. Diagon Alley bustled with midsummer activity. Families with Hogwarts letters in hand moved from shop to shop, gathering cauldrons, books, and potion ingredients. Street vendors called out the virtues of their wares, from self-stirring tea spoons to ever-clean handkerchiefs. Through it all, Harry Potter walked with barely contained wonder, his eyes drinking in every detail of the magical shopping district. "Stop gawking," Griphook muttered beside him. "You look like a tourist." The young goblin was dressed in what passed for casual wizard robes, though he still managed to look distinctly unwizard-like. His pointed ears were partially hidden by a hooded cloak, but there was no disguising his distinctive features entirely. Still, goblins in Diagon Alley weren't unheard of, though they typically kept to Gringotts rather than shopping in wizard establishments. "I am a tourist," Harry replied, adjusting the plain black cap that covered his distinctive scar and hair. "And so are you, technically." Griphook snorted. "I'm a security professional on assignment." "You're my friend who's been nagging to get out of the bank for months," Harry countered with a grin. "That too," Griphook admitted. "Where to first? Books? Robes?" Harry consulted his supply list. Robe fitting might take a while. Let's start there, then work our way down the list. They headed toward Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions, weaving through the crowd. Harry noticed a few curious glances thrown Griphook's way, but most shoppers were too absorbed in their own errands to pay much attention to a young wizard accompanied by a goblin. The bell above Madame Malkin's door jingled as they entered. The shop smelled of new fabric and the faint ozone scent of tailoring charms. A squat, smiling witch dressed in mauve approached them. "Hogwarts, dear?" she asked Harry, then paused as she noticed Griphook. Her professional smile faltered only slightly. "And, good morning to you as well, sir. I need the complete first-year set," Harry said politely. "Plus a few extras for everyday wear, if that's possible." "Of course, dear. Come along to the fitting area. Your companion can wait in the chairs by the window." Harry glanced at Griphook, who nodded slightly and moved to take a seat. The security protocol they'd agreed upon was that Griphook would maintain visual contact where possible, but give Harry space to interact normally with shopkeepers. In the back of the shop, Madame Malkin directed Harry onto a footstool. "Arms out, please," she instructed, slipping a long black robe over his head and beginning to pin it to the right length. Harry wasn't alone in the fitting area. On the stool beside him stood a pale boy with a pointed face and white blonde hair. He looked over at Harry with mild interest. "Hogwarts too?" the boy asked. "Yes," Harry replied simply, remembering Sharpfang's lessons about revealing only what was necessary in initial interactions. "My father's next door buying my books and mother's up the street looking at wands," the boy said in a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry raised an eyebrow slightly. The boy's tone reminded him of the few pure-blood wizards who sometimes came to Gringotts and treated the goblins with barely disguised contempt, all entitlement and no awareness. "Have you got your own broom?" the boy went on. "Not yet," Harry said. "Play Quidditch at all?" "I've studied the theory, but haven't had much opportunity to play." This was true. While Harry had read about Quidditch and even watched a professional match once, a rare excursion with heavy security, the limited outdoor spaces available to him at Gringotts hadn't allowed for flying practice. The boy looked slightly confused by this answer but pressed on. "I do. Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say, I agree." "Know what house you'll be in yet?" "No one knows until they get there," Harry replied, remembering what McGonagall had told him during one of her educational assessment visits. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, but I know I'll be in Slytherin, all our family have been," the boy said. "Imagine being in Hufflepuff, I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Before Harry could answer, the boy's attention was drawn to the front of the shop. "I say, look at that man," he said suddenly, nodding toward the window. Harry turned to see Griphook standing by the window, his back to them as he surveyed the street outside with the practiced vigilance of a security professional. "That's a goblin," the boy said with obvious distaste. "What's one doing in here? They usually stay in their bank." Harry felt a flash of anger but kept his expression neutral. "He's with me, actually." The blonde boy looked genuinely startled. "With you? Why would you have a goblin escort? Unless..." His gray eyes narrowed with sudden interest. "Who are you, anyway?" Before Harry could decide how to answer, Madame Malkin saved him the trouble. "That's you done, my dear," she said, helping Harry step down from the footstool. "See you at Hogwarts, I suppose," Harry said to the boy, who was still watching him with suspicious curiosity. He rejoined Griphook at the front of the shop, paid for his robes, and arranged to have the completed set delivered to Gringotts later that day. "Problem?" Griphook asked quietly as they left the shop, noticing Harry's expression. "Not a problem," Harry replied. "Just my first encounter with wizard prejudice against goblins. Or at least, the first time it was directed at me by association." Griphook's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. Get used to it. That won't be the last time. Their next stops were less eventful. At Flourish and Blotts, Harry purchased his required textbooks plus several supplementary titles that caught his interest. At the apothecary, he selected a high-quality potions kit on Griphook's recommendation. Never skimp on ingredients that might explode in your face. A stop at Wiseacre's wizarding equipment yielded a telescope, brass scales, and other necessary items. As they made their way through the crowded street, Harry became aware of occasional double-takes from passers-by. His disguise was minimal, just a cap and ordinary clothes, but so far it seemed sufficient to prevent immediate recognition. Almost 11, Griphook noted, checking a pocket watch. Time to meet McGonagall at Ollivander's. They made their way to the narrow, shabby shop with peeling gold letters over the door, Ollivander's, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. In the dusty window, a single wand lay on a faded purple cushion. Professor McGonagall was waiting outside, her tall figure and emerald green robes making her easy to spot. Right on schedule, Mr. Potter, she said approvingly. How has your shopping expedition been so far? Educational, Harry replied with a small smile. I've already had an interesting conversation about house prejudice and goblin-wizard relations. McGonagall's lips thinned. I see. Well, purchasing your wand is perhaps the most significant moment in a young wizard's preparation for Hogwarts. Are you ready? Harry nodded, suddenly feeling a flutter of nerves. Among all the magical knowledge he'd absorbed at Gringotts, wand lore remained somewhat mysterious. Goblins didn't use wands, weren't legally permitted to, in fact, a restriction that Ragnarok had described as one of many wizard attempts to control magic they fear. The shop was tiny inside, empty except for a single spindly chair which McGonagall took while Griphook remained standing near the door. Harry felt a strange tingling on the back of his neck, as if the thousands of narrow boxes stacked to the ceiling contained something alive rather than mere wooden wands. Good afternoon, said a soft voice. Harry turned to see an old man standing before him, his wide, pale eyes shining like moons through the gloom of the shop. Hello, Harry said politely. Ah yes, said the man. Yes, yes. I thought I'd be seeing you soon. Harry Potter. It wasn't a question. You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 10¼ inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. Ollivander moved closer, and Harry resisted the urge to step back. The man's silvery eyes were a bit unnerving. Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand. 11 inches. Pliable. A little more power and excellent for transfiguration. Well, I say your father favored it, it's really the wand that chooses the wizard, of course. Mr. Ollivander had come so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. And that's where. He touched the lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long, white finger. I'm sorry to say I sold the wand that did it, he said softly. 13½ inches. You. Powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands, well, if I'd known what that wand was going out into the world to do. He shook his head, then, to Harry's relief, spotted McGonagall and Griphook. Minerva. Dogwood and dragon heartstring, 9½ inches, quite rigid, isn't it? It is, Garrick, McGonagall confirmed with a nod. Ollivander's gaze shifted to Griphook, curiosity evident in his expression. And a goblin companion. How unusual. He studied Griphook for a moment, then turned back to Harry with heightened interest. Raised among goblins, then. Most unusual indeed. This may be a more interesting fitting than I anticipated. Harry wasn't sure how to respond to that, but Ollivander had already moved on, pulling out a long tape measure with silver markings. Which is your wand arm? He asked. I'm right-handed, Harry replied. Hold out your arm. That's it. He measured Harry from shoulder to finger, then wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, knee to armpit and round his head. As he measured, he said, "Every Ollivander wand has a core of a powerful magical substance, Mr. Potter. We use unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and the heartstrings of dragons. No two Ollivander wands are the same, just as no two unicorns, dragons, or phoenixes are quite the same. And of course, you will never get such good results with another wizard's wand." Harry suddenly realized that the tape measure, which was now measuring between his nostrils, was doing this on its own. Mr. Ollivander was flitting around the shelves, taking down boxes. "That will do," he said, and the tape measure crumpled into a heap on the floor. "Right then, Mr. Potter. Try this one. Beechwood and dragon heartstring. 9 inches. Nice and flexible. Just take it and give it a wave." Harry took the wand and waved it around a bit, but Mr. Ollivander snatched it out of his hand almost at once. "Maple and phoenix feather. 7 inches. Quite whippy." Harry tried, but he had hardly raised the wand when it, too, was snatched back by Mr. Ollivander. "No, here, ebony and unicorn hair, 8.5 inches, springy. Go on, try it out." Harry tried. And tried. The pile of tried wands was mounting higher and higher on the spindly chair next to McGonagall, but the more wands Mr. Ollivander pulled from the shelves, the happier he seemed to become. "Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry, we'll find the perfect match here somewhere, I wonder, now, yes, why not, unusual combination, Holly and something went wrong with this response, please try again." Shift the narrative to the next chapter. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.